Hello everyone, Alex here, and this is my friend Kaylee, and today I have a bit of a special episode for you guys. We have this laptop here. It's a
HP something?
you don't even know what it is. It's an HP Pavilion G7 series. It's a G71075DX, and got a bit of a common issue here that you see with a lot of these laptops, that you turn them on and I mean it powers on, but you get nothing on the screen. As you can see, let me try to get rid of some of that glare there. And I haven't done a whole lot of these. I haven't dealt with this like too often, but what happens is that there's issues with the GPU and the solder balls underneath it, and a lot of the times you either need to reflow them or reball them. And I've only done it a handful of times, but today we're actually going to be reballing this unit. So we got to take it all apart and get to the GPU and everything. Okay, so now we got the motherboard, and I just set it on top of this anti-static bag here because I don't want to accidentally zap it. And we have to remove a few things as well. We got to remove the heatsink, and that's just held on with these 3 screws here. So that will just come right out. And there's one little connector here for the fan, so just pull that off. And once those screws are loose, this will just come right off. So this is the main culprit right here. It's an AMD Radeon. It's an IGP 1105. I mean, you can, if you didn't know any better, you would think that that's never been removed, but I have actually removed this one once. Actually, the only way you can actually tell that it's been removed is that it originally had some of this epoxy on the corners, like it does on this one here on that GPU, but that's gone, so because I had to remove it. So yeah, I'm going to be removing that. I'm also going to remove the CPU right now while I'm at it. That just you just twist that and then the CPU comes right out. Another thing we want to remove is these little plastic tape parts here that just they just kind of cover the board up here from the outside where the RAM is, and then also this one here. The only reason I'm removing this is because once I heat all this up, I don't want it to get all warped. And this particular piece here is just to protect from the fan, because it's got this metallic piece right here, and that, you know, kind of sits over that, so we don't want that to somehow make contact with the board and short something out and kill it even worse. So this is kind of easy to remove because I removed it before. So it's still sticky, not as sticky as it originally was, but it still sticks, so it should be fine. Other than that, there's really nothing else to remove on this board. Although what I am going to be doing is I'm going to be protecting most of the board with some aluminum foil. I'm just going to make a little cutout for the GPU there, and I'm going to use some Kapton tape to hold everything on. And that's just to prevent the heat from the hot air gun or the hot air station nozzle from hitting some of these other parts around here and melting them. Like, I don't want to melt the processor socket, and I don't want to melt this little connector here. So I got my little sheet of aluminum foil here, and I'm going to be laying this kind of just across like that. And what I want to do is I just want to make a cutout where the actual GPU is, which would be that right there. I need to cut this out, except that I don't want to use anything sharp, so I'm just going to use my fingernail, and this actually works pretty well. You just put like some pressure against it. I'm going to shape it out like that, and then I can just kind of pry this up and make a little hole for that. I'm sure there's got to be a better way to do this, but oh well, this works. And that's all we care about. So I'm going to put some right here where this connector is for the fan, and kind of pat this around. And I'm going to be using some of this Kapton tape. I'm going to roll like this. I bought this from Deal Extreme. It was only a few dollars, and I mean, it's so thin that you get a ton of it in this little roll. I'm going to be using this to stick the aluminum to the board, and I'm just going to try to get it as close as possible to the GPU. And I want to get it as tight on the board here as possible because the flux tends to leak in underneath the tape and then it loosens it up and then it lifts up, and I really don't want that to happen, at least not too much. So I'm trying to get it as flat as I can on that board. So that's it for that. Now we got the GPU exposed while protecting everything else. And I can actually cut some of this aluminum off. I'm probably just gonna I'm just gonna fold it up. I don't want to cover the bottom because on the bottom we want it exposed to the heating plates so that it heats up the board evenly and it doesn't warp. One thing you really don't want on these is a warped board because that could just cause more issues later on, if not immediately. So I'm just gonna fold these up here. Majority of the heat's gonna be concentrated in this area anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. So that's that. Our board is pretty much prepped for now. We're gonna head over to the heating plate and set all that stuff up, and then we'll continue this video. We know that we're going to be dealing with the GPU on the motherboard of the HP laptop, but for those of you who may not actually know too much about this issue is actually very similar to what used to happen to, or actually happens to a lot earlier Xbox 360s and the PS3s, where you'd get the red ring of death or the yellow light of death. Here we don't actually get any sort of a message or anything indicating what the issue might be. It's just the LCD just does not come on. We don't see anything, and actually the laptop itself doesn't really do much. You don't hear the hard drive reading to load the OS or anything. And what we're dealing with at GPU is it's a BGA package. It's a ball grid array, and basically what that means is just that you have this big array of balls arranged into a grid, and that looks a lot like this, which this is actually a Xbox 360 GPU. You can see that there's a ton of little circular contacts, and if you look at it from the side, because it's been cleaned off, you see that they're just flat. So there's going to be a ball of solder in between each single one of these contact points here and the contact points on the motherboard, and the solder doesn't just transmit signals to and from the chip. It also is what holds the chip to the board. There's no retaining clips or anything that attaches this to the motherboard, and in comparison to something like an older Pentium 4 CPU, which had pins, because these are designed to fit in a socket, so that this is held on with just solder. And these are actually very similar to something newer like this Pentium dual core CPU, which has nothing but just flat contact points on the bottom, except that these are designed to just fit in a socket, and then there's a clip that holds pressure from this against the spring terminals underneath. The way a BGA package works, or the way it's held onto the board, is by way of all those little solder balls, as I explained. So here we basically have the GPU on top, and we have the motherboard on the bottom. The problem pretty much stems from the use of lead-free solder, which is used in pretty much everything nowadays, and this problem basically plagues a lot of consumer electronics. What happens is that the lead-free solder, which is usually denoted by the the PB with the slash going through it, is that it's got a high melting point, and so it's not able to expand and contract very reliably, or over time it's capable of cracking or breaking, and then you lose contact between the 2 points where it was supposed to be, and then you have issues. So on something like this GPU and the motherboard, the GPU generates a lot of heat. So this is constantly, when it's in use, it gets hot, and maybe it'll expand a little bit, and then as it cools, it'll contract. And you have also the issue that the GPU gets pretty warm, but nothing on the motherboard itself is actually getting hot, especially underneath the GPU where there's nothing. I mean, there's going to be some bypass caps and stuff, but those aren't really going to generate any heat or anything. So as this happens over time, the expanding and contracting, eventually you might get one of these solder balls to crack, one or more, you know, it could be anything. So once that happens, you lose all transmission of data between these 2 points. And if this is something important like an address or a data line between the GPU and some RAM or something, or between the GPU and the CPU, then you've got nothing going on. It's going to be basically, the GPU is not going to be receiving what it needs or sending out what it needs, and it's just going to sit there and not do anything. Well, one way to take care of this issue, which is really not very recommended, is to use a heat gun where you heat the GPU and the board and everything, and you kind of, you know, just heat up everything to get it to try to get it to like an even temperature, and then you kind of blast the GPU with heat for a few seconds. And what you're hoping for is that maybe the solder will melt a little bit to the point where it makes contact again. Although this technique works, it's usually not permanent, and in the long run, if you continue doing this, you're eventually just going to damage things. In the short term, it might work, and you can get like a few weeks out of this or something. As I explained, that the first time I did this, I did it with the heat gun, which I mean, it's not something that I would normally do, but I just didn't have the equipment to actually deal with this properly then. And the laptop worked for a few weeks, but then eventually it just ended up dying again, and, you know, wasn't doing anything. So having done the reflow with the heat gun once, I really did not want to do this again, because I did not want to damage anything permanently. So the only way to do this properly was going to be to just completely remove the old solder balls and just basically start over from scratch, except that this time I was not going to be using lead-free solder. I was going to use actual leaded solder, which is kind of better for this kind of stuff, because it's leaded solder expands and is a lot more flexible. You know, it's able to expand and contract a lot more reliably, and it's less likely that this issue would happen again. Except, to me, this issue did happen again, and I think it wasn't so much because it didn't bond properly, but I think it's because of I might have not cleaned the board properly before I reattached the GPU to it. What I think may have happened is, and this is actually something I've noticed too when I've removed a few BGAs from some 360s, is that it looks like there may have been a little like film of oxidation or something on the pad that's on the board itself. So what I think may have happened is, if there was some contamination on the pad on the motherboard, maybe one or more of these solder balls could have melted and made some contact there, but over time, from the expanding and contracting, it could have separated due to the fact that it already wasn't making very much contact, and then I ended up getting a cold joint there where I'm not getting any contact. So we're just gonna clean everything off and start from scratch. Once I remove the GPU from the board, I'm going to, flip it over, reapply some leaded solder balls, and flow them onto the pads on the GPU, so that they're seated on each pad, and they're properly bonded, and they're making contact and everything. And then I'm going to place the GPU back onto the motherboard, and I'm going to try to make sure that I get pretty good alignment in its little designated area. So once I do that, I'm going to have the bottom of the balls here sitting one on each one of those little pads, and once we heat everything up and we get it to the temperature where it's going to flow again, then these balls are going to melt, and then they're going to solder themselves onto the pads on the board. Alright, so we're all set up here to start working on this, and in the bathroom, because it's one of the better places I can do it. I can't really do this on my workbench at the moment, and plus also we got the exhaust fan here, so I can turn that on, and all the fumes can evacuate the room, and they're not going to be in the house and everything. So, yep, I might go through everything that I have here. starting with this thing. This is the infrared heating plate. So it's got these 2 plates here that get hot. There's a little thermocouple right there that monitors the temperature on there. Very simple controls. It's just you turn the heaters on with this. This is the main switch, and the heaters don't operate until you hit the little button here. This was really cheap, and it's obviously I'm not using like really professional stuff here. I can't afford to spend thousands on like a proper gig, so gotta make do with what I got here. And this is a T8280. I bought this on eBay for like about, I think it was like 150 bucks or so. It wasn't too bad. And then I got this I'm not even sure if that's supposed to be a P or NAR or what, but it says WP8058D. It goes by a bunch of different names on eBay. This was like 60 bucks, I think. And what I did to be able to kind of hold it above the work here is I took this lamp stand that I bought at Home Depot. I removed the lamp and I made this little mount here so that I could attach the nozzle with these hose clamps, and I made this plate and I curved it so that it would fit in there. It's got a little bit of a foam in there to just kind of pat it. And this magnet that's on the outside here, that's from a hard drive, I use it to turn it on and off because there's a little reed switch in there. And normally when you put it on the base here, there's actually a magnet there that makes it turn off or cool and then turn off. But since I can't do that, I have this magnet here, and I just kind of like slide it into place when I want it to turn off, and then when I want to use it, I slide it off to the side. Cap on tape, gonna need a little more of that. This little base here is the little reballing jig. The chip is actually gonna go in the middle there, and I use this this little thumb screw here to, like, you know, open it up or close it. The stencil is gonna go in this piece here, so I gotta open that up. I got my stencil for that particular GPU right here. It says SP700RD780, so this can actually be used for several different chips, and it's a 0.50 millimeter ball size. And I got my balls too. They're all in here. I got different sizes, but I'm going to be using the 0.5 ones, as you can see, 0.6. There's several different ones that I have. I also use these for, I've done a couple Xbox 360s with those, and those worked fine too, so hopefully this will go well again. Going to be using a soldering iron along with some desoldering braid to suck up all the solder off the chip and off the board to clean them. This is just a regular leaded solder, which is actually what I'm going to be using for the balls that we're using. This are going to be leaded solder balls. So, and then I got my 2 multimeters here, my little cheapo Harbor Freight one with thermocouples. This one's going to be monitoring the temperature of the board on the bottom, and this one's going to be monitoring the temperature close to the GPU. So this one I'm going to mount like right on the corner of like close to the corner of the GPU, so I can get a pretty accurate temperature reading from that. And then I got some alcohol wipes, a few Q-tips, got some alcohol, some isopropyl alcohol, and this here is a little, if I could open this up one-handed, well, you can see it through there. It's one of those little suction tools that I'm going to use to pull the chip off the board. So that the metal nozzle piece there attaches to the end of that, and then I got to put on one of those little rubber, they're like little suction cups that go on the end. So I'm going to put that together. That's pretty much all I need to get this going. Oh, and this here is the nozzle that's going to heat up the GPU. This is a 40 millimeter square nozzle. When I originally bought this on eBay, there was the clamp that was supposed to attach directly to the nozzle here on the hot air station, and well, go figure, the one I got like totally did not fit. I couldn't enlarge it or anything, it just wouldn't fit at all. So what I ended up doing is I cut a piece of steel here and I shaped it round, and then I tack welded it to the nozzle here, so it would hold on together. I kind of left it split so that it can kind of stretch out and fit over this pretty snug, and it works pretty well. Although what I have to do is I have to make this little aluminum gasket, and if this would focus, it would be nice. There you go. So this little aluminum gasket just kind of prevents the air from leaking out the sides because it doesn't seal properly just in there, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it in there, but I had to cut off the original clamp that it was supposed to attach with because it was just in the way and I couldn't fit this over it. So that's how that works. And I'm going to be actually putting this on, but at one point I have to take it off to get the balls to flow onto the GPU. Okay, a couple of things here that kind of suck. First of all, the shape of this motherboard is not square. As you can see, it's got this pretty odd shape, which is pretty typical of a lot of laptop motherboards. They're not square. They kind of design them so that they fit in the crevices inside the case. So I gotta get this to be supported like on the only edges I have, which is like this side right here, and then this little edge right here by the VGA connector, and then on this other end here. However, that leaves me no support in the middle, which would cause this to sag a little down. So I got to use this bar that comes with the heating plate, and I'm gonna have to use like a little washer or something just to support it from there. I'm probably gonna move it off to the side though, because I don't want it to be directly underneath the GPU, because I want there to be plenty of heat underneath it to melt the solder. Actually, I just realized that this isn't going to work because it interferes where the connectors kind of interfere with it, and so it doesn't sit flush. It doesn't allow the board to sit flush on this edge here, so I'm going to do away with that, and I'm going to try to figure out another way to support it, maybe from that screw hole there. And I haven't used this, I haven't tried using this bar before, so I didn't realize that it wasn't going to work. I usually would just like support it from the three corners, except I didn't really like that so much because it did sag a little bit on this side, and I really don't want it sagging at all if I can avoid it. So I'm going to see if I can figure something out to support this side. Alright, so here's what I came up with. I found these screws that fit in that hole just right, so I put a little nut underneath it, and that one there is going to support that corner. And because these are kind of wedged in between these support bars here, they can't really move around very much. And on the other side here, I did the same thing. There's another one of those screws with a nut on the bottom, so that's going to prevent this from sagging once it heats up and softens up a little bit. And I got to put on the thermocouple first though, so I'm going to have to remove it again, but at least I have those set so I don't have to bother so much with it. Here's one of the thermocouples. This one's the one that's going to be monitoring the temperature from the bottom side of the board, and this one's placed a few inches away from the GPU, which is actually like around in this area on the other side of the board. And the other one's going to go like right close to the GPU so that we can monitor that temperature. So there's the second thermocouple right there close to the corner of the GPU. That one we're going to use to accurately keep track of the temperature that the GPU's at, even though it's not going to be exact, but at least give us an idea of what we're dealing with. And as we can see over here right now, the temperature on these two thermocouples is pretty similar because we haven't done anything yet. The board's not hot, so well, it's a good indicator that things are going well if both of them are at the same temperature. So we're going to start off by heating up preheating the board to about 150 degrees or so. And on my plate here, to get to that temperature, I have to set this to about 200. Oh, it was already there. To about 230 degrees, and that gives me about 150 degrees at the board. So we're going to turn this on, and we're going to wait for the bottom thermocouple, which is going to be this one right here, to reach about 150. Normally when you have one of the really expensive reflow machines that has the controls for everything, you can set your profiles on it and have it like pretty much do everything automatic for you. Here I got to do everything manually, so I have to keep track of time, and like I got to make sure, okay, do this for 30 seconds and then this temperature for like another 30 seconds or whatever. And it's really tedious, so I have to like pretty much do it all in one shot. I can't like ignore this, or I might end up frying something or killing the whole board or whatever. The bottom temperature is starting to get close to 150 now here. I might actually turn down the temperature on the plate here a little bit once we start getting closer, because I don't want to overshoot by too much. And then as you can see, the Top one here is just a little bit cooler, but that's obviously because it's on the top side, so it is going to be cooler than the bottom. Alright, so the top one here is almost at 150, and it actually pretty much is there, so I'm going to turn this down a little bit. I'm just going to put it at 220. And I want to set my hot air nozzle here down to about 150 as well. Right now it's not on, I got to remove that magnet, but now we've hit 150 on the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and, I just forgot to do this part. Okay, I got the nozzle on top here. I'm going to position it a few inches above the board. Or not a few inches, but about an inch or so above the board. And I'm going to turn it on. And what I want to do is I want to bring the top temperature up to about 150 as well, and as you can see now it's starting to climb. So I want to try to keep both of these temperatures pretty even for a while. I don't want the bottom one to go up too much, and I don't want to overshoot on the top, so I'm going to slowly start raising the temperature on the hot air here just so I can get it to match that 150. And I got to keep track of this one too to make sure that the bottom one doesn't go up too much. Okay, so now the top one here is getting close to 150 now, which is what we want, and the bottom one is still about the same. We want to raise the bottom one to about 160. I'm going to hold it there for about a minute or so. So I'm going to have to turn this one up a little bit. And once it gets to 160, we're going to hold it for a minute. Right now this one's here says 230, but the board temperature is actually just what's there. It says 152. And it's taking its sweet time, but there it goes. It takes a lot of playing around with this because this thing's not exact, so this is what I'm talking about. You got to be like constantly fiddling with it. And we're at 156 on the bottom. The top is saying 153. 157, and we're just at about 160 here. I'm going to lower the temperature on the nozzle to 160, and then I'm going to put this right above the GPU because I want the GPU to get quite a bit of that heat now. We want to get them both to about 160, and this one's actually almost already there. It says 158, 159, 160. Okay, so now we're going to hold that for about a minute. Hopefully they'll stay pretty even. So far, so good. They're rising about the same rate, so I think we're okay. And then after that minute, I'm going to raise the temperature on this one, or actually the temperature on the nozzle, to 250 for about 30 seconds, and then I'm going to start slowly increasing it until until the solder underneath the GPU melts so I can remove it. And what I'm going to do to test and see if the GPU is loose enough is I'm going to like gently tap it with this toothpick here, and once it's loose enough I'm going to lift up the nozzle. I'm going to take this, squeeze it, and then just suck the chip right off the board. And it's been about a minute. I'm going to go ahead and raise this to 250. I'm going to hold that for 30 seconds. And I'm going to frequently here check it and make sure that it's, see if it's ready or not. Oh, it's actually already there. Shoot, that was quick. So, stick it up, and there it is. That's the GPU. Let's go ahead and turn this down. I'm going to lower the temperature on the plate. I'm going to go set this down here and try not to drop it. There it is. Now, I have to clean the solder off of that board. And to do that, I'm going to plug in my soldering iron here. And I'm going to use a little bit of flux. And this Kingbo stuff is actually some of the best stuff you can use for this. It's really nice flux. I'm going to put a little dab of that on there. This went a lot quicker than it was supposed to. I don't know why. Usually it wasn't this easy. I gotta wait for this thing to heat up. But I'm also gonna take some braid, and the only stuff I have is this. Really, it's about, what is it? I don't know, about an eighth. It's 1.9 millimeter wick, but I need it to be a little bit fatter than that, so I just kind of squeeze it together like this, and it widens it up, and that helps a lot because it covers more area. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drop some solder onto this board, and I want to clean off all the excess solder that's on the pads here, the BGA pads. Just going to get a little ball here, and I don't want to keep it in one spot for too long, so I'm going to keep moving this around. Try to get it on everything there. And yeah, I'm surprised that this came off so quick, but then again, I forgot that these are that I already had leaded balls on there, not the lead-free ones, so they melt at a lower temperature, so that was kind of my bad, but hopefully everything will be fine. I think we're good. I'm going to get this little solder ball off of here, and I'm going to finish cleaning the rest off with the wick. So I'm just going to run this along the pins here. And I got to be kind of gentle with this because I don't want to lift up any pads, because we lift up some pads and pretty much ruined everything, and kind of pointless to continue. And these are so tiny that it's not like you can fix them in any sort of way. And as you can see, the flux has already made the tape come off. Alright, most of this looks pretty clean now. So I can still feel a few little bumps here, so I'm just gonna get through a little more, but it's getting there. Alright, I think that's good. So now I'm going to clean off that board with a little bit of alcohol and a Q-tip. And get rid of all the excess flux that's on there. So here's a close-up of the board here using a macro lens. As you can see, we didn't damage any of the pads, and everything looks to be intact. So once we clean off that GPU and put it back on, it should all be good, hopefully. Fingers crossed. And there's the GPU itself. As you can see, we have a lot of solder to remove from that, but nothing looks damaged there either because it all came off pretty easily, so I think it should be all good. And in case you're wondering, these are just a bunch of Xbox 360 GPUs from other ones that I had practice on previously. And there's some of the DDR memory. So these are the 0.5 millimeter balls that we're going to be using here. And I got the stencil mounted on this frame. And like I said, this just goes over the top. I'm going to be putting the GPU in here now, but I got to make it a little bit smaller here. It's too big. So there we go. And we're going to clean this off the same way we cleaned off the motherboard. This just sits inside those little cutouts there. I'm going to tighten it up, but not too tight, just enough to hold it in place. I don't want to damage the chip, I don't want to bend it, I don't want to crush the sides or anything. And again, I'm going to put a little drop of leaded solder on top here. Oh, I may should add some flux first. So, a little bit of flux. And then we'll add some solder. And go to town on that chip. And again, gotta be gentle, don't want to rush. Don't want to damage anything. We damage this chip, we're pretty much dead, so. Or, chip's dead. I'm sure we could probably get a replacement, but that would be just more of a hassle, so let's just not damage what we have. Okay, looks like I got most of it off here. Let's push this off to the side, and this stuff gets nasty once it's heated up a bit, so this way it looks all brown. That looks okay. Some of those off, and then again with the braid. You can kind of feel the bumps as you're moving this across, but like I said, you don't want to put too much pressure on it because you might end up like lifting one of the pads. And honestly, this is not the best soldering iron to be using for this, but the soldering station that I have, it's a Heiko 927. I don't have the proper tip. I only have a small little conical tip on that, so it's not going to do me any good here. You want to have something that has like a large surface on the bottom so that you can get plenty of the heat onto there to melt everything without too much effort. You don't want to be running this thing in one spot for too long. You're going to damage something. So that should be good for that. I'm going to clean it with some alcohol as well. So here's the GPU all cleaned off. As you can see, we're not missing any pads on that either, and I cleaned off a good amount of the solder. So there's if you run your finger across the top of the surface here, you're not going to feel any bumps. Same with the board, same with the motherboard. If you run your fingers across the top, you shouldn't really feel any bumps. If there are some bumps, that probably means that you didn't remove enough of the solder. But both of these are pretty good, so we're good to go. Now we're going to be putting a little bit of flux on the top there and putting on the new solder balls. I want to put the stencil on top here, but I want to make sure that I get it in the right orientation. So I got to find out which end is what, and this corner here goes to that corner there. So I put this on top, and what I have to do is I have to adjust this until all the little pads on the, you're probably not going to be able to see this through the video, but I want the pads on the GPU to be directly underneath each one of these holes on the stencil here. Okay, so once I got the stencil adjusted so that every pad from the GPU is directly underneath one of these holes, I tighten up these screws here on the edges, and that clamps it down so it holds it up pretty still, so that this isn't vibrating around and we don't lose the alignment. We can also adjust the height of this to the base using these little set screws here. I can like bring them up a little bit so that the stencil doesn't sit directly above the GPU, because we don't want the stencil to touch the GPU. We want it to just be sitting slightly above so that when the balls fall through the hole, they touch the flux that I'm going to apply to the top of the, or to the bottom of the GPU there, and they stick. But we don't want that flux to touch the stencil, because otherwise the ball's going to stick to the stencil, and then when I pull it off, it's not going to do us any good. So that's what we want to make sure that, to avoid that. And right now it looks like I got a pretty decent amount of room between the GPU and the stencil. I know you can't see it on camera, but I'm just kind of looking through the side here, and it looks like I got a pretty decent gap. So now that I've got that set, I'm going to put a little tiny bit of flux on the GPU here, and then I'm just going to spread it around with my finger. I want a very, very thin layer of flux distributed over the top of this GPU, and like I said, that's just going to help the solder balls stick to the GPU without rolling off to the sides or anything. And that looks like it's going to be good. So very, very, very thin layer of flux on there. And now we're going to place stencil above again and make sure that the alignment's still correct. We don't want to get it wrong, because then there's going to be balls in the wrong spot. So now that that's done, I'm going to drop some of these onto here. And you don't want to touch the balls, because if you have any contaminants on your fingers or anything, they're going to stick to you, and then if any fall down, they're going to stick to each other, and it just becomes a mess. So let's shake this around and try to get one ball in each one of those holes there. And I think I need to use a little more. And conveniently enough, this has a little cutout here on the side so that you can pour them out into something else, and you can reuse the balls that didn't go anywhere. Looks like I still have a few empty spots there, but it's like playing one of those little games. You can get like those really cheap ones that have like the little steel balls that you have to try to like get in the hole or whatever. So now we got one ball in each hole, and they're pretty good. What I do, and I know it's probably not ideal either, but I just lightly run my nail through the top just to get them to kind of seat down into the flux a little better, because I've had a few times where they didn't seat properly or they didn't stick enough, and then when I lifted the stencil up they kind of shifted over to the side and made contact with one of their neighbors, and then that just becomes another hassle. So I just very lightly just run my finger over the tops of these, because if I put too much pressure down, what can happen is I'm going to make the chip shift a little bit, and then it can make contact with the stencil, and like I said, I don't want that. So just going to do that back and forth a little here. And once I'm done with that, then I got to gently lift up the stencil. And moment of truth. There we go. Every pad has a ball, and I didn't lose any to the stencil. There's none stuck to the stencil at all. And I got a little bit of flux on the stencil here, but it was only on these corners where these posts are, so I'm good. I gotta set this aside here and be careful not to spill the rest of these balls. Wish I had a little container to put them in. But for now, I'm just gonna set it off to the side, slanted, so that they don't fall out. Now, this next part I've heard that people kind of frown upon a little, but I've done it before and it works pretty well, so don't get on my case. I'm going to remove the nozzle from the hot air gun here, and I'm just going to use this thing's kind of broken, so I gotta do that, but I'm going to slowly heat up the top of the GPU, or it's the bottom side. I'm going to heat up the bottom side of the GPU here and get all these solder balls to melt and stick to their corresponding pads. But first I'm just going to do a little visual inspection here and make sure that the balls are all pretty well aligned, and it looks like they're pretty good, so I think we shouldn't have any issues with that either. And this might be a little bit hard to record, but we're going to try to get it so we can get pretty close to it so you can actually see the balls like seating into place. Alright, so these are the balls that haven't been reflowed onto the GPU yet. And right now I got my nozzle set to 300 degrees. And I'm gonna lower the airflow a little bit, and you're gonna be able to see the moment when the balls start flowing and melting onto the GPU there. And I have the nozzle set pretty high above the GPU here because I want to slowly and gently heat it up. I don't want to heat it up too fast, so I'm kind of like swirling it around and like trying to bring it in closer and closer very slowly. You can kind of see the shadow of the tip moving around in there. So I was just about to reflow these on there when I noticed that there's two balls right here on the edge, on the left hand, close to the bottom here, that are touching each other. I'm trying to get it here with this little pick here. If you can see, like right there, those two. I'm going to use this really sharp pick to try to separate them because I don't think they've melted yet. So let's see if I can do this. Oh sweet, they weren't stuck together yet, so I'm going to put one on each pad there and try to keep them from rolling back in together with each other. Okay. Now there's a couple of more iffy ones right here on the right hand side. Close to the same level. I don't know where the heck they did that, but separate those. And right there. And right here. This part's a bit of a pain, especially on a chip this small. I didn't really have this issue with the Xbox 360s, but on this one here I've had this issue before. And I just have to be like super careful and make sure that nothing's touching each other. Alright, so we're gonna give it another go. And this is kind of why you have to bring this in slowly so that everything heats up evenly and the airflow doesn't cause the balls to roll in together. And there we go. We got two over here on the right hand side that are trying to get back together again. You gotta keep them separated. Nope, see these two right here. They will not leave each other alone. Come on, you two, break it up. See, now it's gonna be hard. I gotta let it cool off a little bit because the flux is too liquid. All right, let's try this again. And right before the balls flow, you're gonna see they kind of enlarge a little bit, and then they turn kind of like a really matte silver, and then all of a sudden they flow, they melt onto the pad, and then they turn really shiny. So hopefully you'll be able to see that here in the video. I'm trying to keep my eye out, making sure that none of these come together, and there's apparently a couple right here on the bottom right again that are trying to touch each other. Dang it. So we're heating this up. I think everything looks pretty good so far. Oh, there's two more. So hopefully we're hitting about that right temperature right about now. I think I'm starting to see them enlarge a bit. Gotta keep moving this around. I don't want to leave it in one spot for too long either. There they go. They're starting to get really gray now. I don't know if you can tell the video, but now they're about to melt onto their pad. So there we go. They're melting onto their individual pads there. It's kind of hard to do at an angle here, trying to record at the same time, but it looks like everything's looking pretty good. Hopefully you saw that. I'm trying not to block it. And I think we're good to go on that. Gotta be really careful not to touch the nozzle to the chip. But that looks really good. So I think that was a successful one. Let's see if we can get it in a little closer there so you can see it better. See, we have nothing touching any of the other balls, so looks like we're gonna be good. Alright, so now that we got the GPU reballed and we got everything cleaned up, we're going to reattach the GPU to the motherboard, and we're going to begin by heating up the board again to 160, and basically we're redoing the same procedure, only backwards. But before we put the GPU back on, we want to put a little bit of flux on the board, on the motherboard, also another thin layer. We don't want to use too much, but we want a decent amount just to cover everything. And then I'm going to spread this around with my finger again. Just want to cover all these pads. We want the solder balls to flow on there, and that'll about do it right there. And then we're going to place the chip on top, but we want to ensure we get the right orientation, and there's usually a little notch on the chip that tells you which way it goes, and on the motherboard I got to match up with that notch. I'm actually going to remove this because it's already not sticking anyways, and the notch is on this side right here on this corner, so I got to make sure I put the GPU with the little notch, which is actually this little corner right here. I don't know if you can see it right there, but this corner right here is the one that has the little triangle that corresponds to that notch on the motherboard. So we're going to place that on top, and what I want to do is I want to align the GPU inside of that square that's drawn on the motherboard. I want to get it as centered as possible so that when the solder melts, each one of those lands on its pad there, so that looks pretty good here. It's pretty centered on that square, so I think we're gonna give that a go. Okay, so I got that on there, and again we're monitoring both temperatures, the bottom and top. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this on video either, because it's really hard to tell, but once the GPU has reached the temperature to melt the solder, you kind of see it lift up a little bit and then it kind of drops down. Okay, so we're just now reaching 150 on the bottom board here, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on the hot air and bring the top to about 150 as well. We'll see if hopefully we can catch the moment when the chip drops after the solder melts. This, it's going to be really difficult, but we'll see if we can get it. Right now, the top's at about 144 almost. The bottom's at 152. And because these are leaded solder balls, they melt at a lower temperature, so this should go by pretty quick once we start reaching its temperature. Alright, so I'm going to bring this nozzle down, and I have to be really careful not to bump that board. Okay, I'm going to start raising the temperature on the hot air here. I'm going to go to about 220 first. Actually, I'll go to 210. Because like I said, this is a leaded solder, so it melts at a lower temperature. When I was doing it at first, I was kind of going with my my manual profile for unleaded for a lead-free solder, but about 215 or so is when I think it should be fully melted. There we go. I can actually see the balls starting to melt. I don't know if it's going to be visible in the video. I'm looking at it from like the side here so I can see what's going on. I'm at 218. I'm going to go no higher than about 230, so just got to keep an eye on it. Okay. They're melting now, and it looks like it's dropped. I think we're good. Yeah, we should be good now. So I'm gonna lift this up. I'm gonna turn off the bottom heater, and I'm just gonna allow it to cool now. And I gotta let it cool for a while because I don't want to disturb anything. Alright, so board has been cooling for a while now, and I've gone ahead and cleaned the top of the GPU, and I'm just going to be putting everything back on, starting with these little plastic sticky sections. Alright, so I got the bare minimum installed on this motherboard in order for it to work. I got the RAM, I got the heatsink, the processor. It doesn't really need anything else. The only thing we're going to do is we're going to connect it to the LCD through here, so we're going to place it back onto that the bottom of the case there, and then we're going to hook up the power connector. I'm just going to try to power it straight off of the power supply, and I removed the little power button from the top half of the case, so I'm going to connect that and we'll see if it powers on. If it powers on and we get something on the display, then we know we're good. Alright, so I got the board seated into the bottom of the tray here. I got the power connected and I got the LCD, and that's all we need other than the power button here. So I'm going to hook up the power supply and we'll give it a shot. And here goes. Here goes. Yeah, oh, okay, there it goes. Wait, no. There we go. Okay. Power's on. Come on, laptop. Yes! Yes! Successful reball and a reattachment. So, high fives all around. And of course, this is showing up because I don't have I took the CMOS battery off, so it cleared all the settings and everything. So we're gonna go ahead and put it back together, and hopefully this time it lasts a lot longer than it did last time. Shut it down. Cut. Alright, so we got everything put back together, all the screws are in place, got the keyboard back in, and should still be good. There we go. Let's go into the BIOS now and ah, crap. So it looks like we're all good. Everything. We'll see how long this holds up. Hopefully won't have any more issues after this one. So thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And see you guys next time.